was a swanky, high-end VIP bar in the heart of the city, a place where only the elite were allowed to enter, where expensive cocktails were served in crystal glasses and the music played just loud enough to add to the atmosphere without overwhelming. Clint Eastwood, ever the man who appreciated good company and good whiskey, found himself inside, having been invited by a friend to unwind for the evening. He wasn't usually one for the flashy, exclusive spots, but tonight he was willing to indulge. He walked into the bar, his sharp suit fitting him perfectly, his presence quiet but undeniable. His reputation preceded him, of course, but Clint wasn't the type to seek attention or fanfare. He preferred the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the public. As he made his way toward the bar, a bouncer, young, muscular, and seemingly confident in his authority, stopped Clint in his tracks. The man looked Clint up and down, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, sir," the bouncer said, his voice firm. "This is a VIP area. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Clint paused, surprised, then gave the bouncer a steady, calm look. "I don't think you understand," Clint said quietly, his voice unwavering. "I'm here as a guest." The bouncer, however, didn't seem to care who Clint was. He crossed his arms and shook his head. "No exceptions," the bouncer said bluntly. "If you're not on the list, you're not getting in." Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't raise his voice or act aggressively. Instead, he simply turned toward the bouncer and spoke with a quiet authority. "I don't think you realize who you're talking to." The bouncer scoffed, clearly uninterested. "Doesn't matter who you are, sir, I'm just doing my job." And with that, he motioned toward the exit, his attitude unshaken, believing he had control of the situation. Clint stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. He could feel the eyes of the other patrons on him, some glancing at him curiously, others hoping to see some kind of confrontation. Clint's reputation wasn't built on drama, but in this moment, he was tempted. He could feel the sting of the bouncer's dismissal, but he didn't allow it to show on his face. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his gaze never leaving the bouncer's. "I've been to many places, son," Clint said, his voice low but filled with a quiet strength. "And I've had my share of doors closed in my face. But I know when I'm being treated with respect, and I know when I'm being disrespected." The bouncer didn't budge, still firm in his stance. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is the policy. You're not on the list, so you'll have to leave." The patrons who had been watching the scene started to murmur among themselves. Some recognized Clint Eastwood immediately, others still couldn't make the connection, but Clint knew he didn't need to make a scene. He wasn't there for a fight. He was there for a drink, to unwind. But his pride and his sense of fairness wouldn't let him walk away quietly. He gave the bouncer a long look, then turned to the crowd with a small smile. "This is why I don't come to places like this," Clint said, loud enough for the room to hear. "It's not the drinks or the atmosphere. It's the people who think they control everything, even the people who deserve a little respect." The room fell silent. Clint's words hit like a ripple through the air, and the bouncer, now visibly uncomfortable, seemed to realize that he had just made a mistake. But before the bouncer could respond, Clint turned back toward him, his voice calm but unwavering. "Tell your manager that Clint Eastwood was here tonight, and tell him I'll be taking my business elsewhere." The bouncer, stunned by the realization of who he was dealing with, opened his mouth to apologize. But Clint was already walking toward the exit, his movements steady and unhurried. As Clint walked toward the exit, the tension in the room was palpable. The bouncer, now flustered, stood frozen, his eyes following Clint's every step. Some of the patrons, realizing who had just walked out, began to whisper among themselves, shocked that they had witnessed a run-in with none other than the legendary Clint Eastwood. Clint didn't turn around. He wasn't looking for an apology, nor did he need the validation of others. He simply walked, his stride steady and confident. He was no stranger to moments like this, and he knew how to handle them without escalating things. But just as he reached the door, something unexpected happened. The manager, a well-dressed man in his late 40s, rushed over from the back, his face a picture of nervousness. "Mr. Eastwood, wait," the manager called out, his voice laced with urgency. Clint stopped and turned to face him, his expression calm but stern. "Is there a problem?" Clint asked, his voice even, not giving the manager any extra room for excuses. The manager took a deep breath, clearly relieved to see Clint standing there, and quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry about what happened. I can't believe our staff treated you that way. That's completely unacceptable. Please let me make it right." Clint raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He didn't need to hear more apologies. What mattered was action. The manager motioned for Clint to follow him inside. "Please, I insist. Let me show you that this is not how we treat our guests, especially someone like you. We'll take care of everything." Clint considered the offer for a moment, his eyes scanning the manager's face. He could tell the man was sincere, and the last thing he wanted was to cause further trouble. But his principle was simple. Respect is earned, not demanded. "All right," Clint said, his tone softening just slightly. "I'll give you one more chance." As they walked back into the bar, Clint could hear the murmurs of the patrons who had witnessed the exchange. They had seen Clint's composure, his quiet authority, and the way he handled the situation with dignity. The manager led Clint to a private table, away from the crowd, and sat him down. "We'll make sure this never happens again, Mr. Eastwood," the manager assured him. Clint nodded, his posture relaxed but firm. "I didn't come here to cause a scene. I just want to enjoy a drink in peace. That's all anyone should ask for." The manager quickly ordered a round of drinks for Clint, apologizing profusely once more for the earlier incident. Clint accepted the drink, his demeanor calm, but his thoughts focused on the principle of the situation rather than the apology itself. He knew that sometimes it wasn't about demanding attention or making a statement. It was about the small, quiet victories. In moments like these, the real victory wasn't about who was right or wrong, but about standing up for what was just, even in the most unexpected circumstances. As the night continued, Clint sat back, sipping his drink in quiet reflection. The manager, now a little more at ease, sat across from him, making small talk to fill the silence. Clint, though usually reserved, offered a few words in return, always measured, never overbearing. It was a peaceful exchange, the kind that Clint preferred. The whole scene, getting kicked out, standing his ground and being offered a second chance, had shifted the energy of the place. It wasn't just the manager or the staff who were now more respectful. It was the patrons too. They had seen a quiet but profound display of authority, the kind that wasn't about asserting dominance but about commanding respect through calm, measured actions. Soon, Clint noticed a few of the other patrons glancing in his direction, some even offering subtle nods of acknowledgement. It wasn't admiration for his fame, it was respect for how he had handled the situation with grace. Before long, the bouncer who had originally caused the confrontation walked over to Clint's table, his face flushed with embarrassment. He approached cautiously, clearly unsure of how Clint would respond. Clint looked up at him, and the bouncer hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Eastwood," he began, his voice filled with regret. I just wanted to apologize. I had no idea who you were. I was out of line, and I've learned my lesson." Clint studied him for a moment, then nodded, slightly. "It's not about who I am," Clint said, his voice steady. "It's about how you treat people. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." The bouncer nodded, clearly taking the words to heart. "Thank you for giving me another chance," he said quietly. Clint simply gave him a small smile and nodded in return. "Now, make sure it doesn't happen again," Clint added, his tone light but with a firmness that left no room for argument. The evening wore on, and the atmosphere in the bar began to shift. The tension that had initially filled the room had dissipated, replaced by a sense of calm. Clint's quiet authority had not only earned him the respect of the staff, but had also subtly changed the mood of the entire space. Patrons who had been watching the scene unfold now spoke in softer tones, their earlier whispers replaced with friendly conversations. Clint wasn't trying to impress anyone or make a show of his actions. He simply believed in standing up for what was right, regardless of the circumstances. As he finished his drink, the manager returned, offering a warm smile and a brief conversation to make sure Clint was comfortable. "I want to thank you again for your patience, Mr. Eastwood," the manager said, his voice genuine. "We've learned a valuable lesson tonight. I'll make sure our staff understands the importance of respect from now on." Clint gave a small, knowing smile. "Just make sure it's a lesson you keep in mind every day, not just for tonight," he said quietly. The manager nodded, a grateful expression on his face. "Absolutely, sir." As Clint stood to leave, the bouncer who had initially kicked him out approached him once more, his face filled with sincerity. "Mr. Eastwood, I just wanted to say, I'm truly sorry for what happened earlier. I really appreciate your understanding." Clint looked at him for a long moment, his eyes steady. "Apologies are easy," he said. "What matters is how you treat others going forward. Remember that." With that, Clint turned and walked toward the door, his steps measured and calm. As he exited the bar, the cool night air wrapped around him, and he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not because of the apology or the acknowledgement, but because he had reminded everyone in that room of something simple but profound, that respect for others, no matter their status or situation, was the true measure of character. As Clint stepped outside into the cool night air, he took a deep breath, the city lights flickering in the distance. The chaos of the evening seemed far behind him now, replaced by a calm certainty that he had done what was right. He wasn't one for grand gestures or seeking recognition. He was content knowing that sometimes the most powerful moments happened in silence away from the spotlight. The next morning, news outlets began to pick up on the story. It wasn't a headline that screamed Clint Eastwood kicked out, but the story of how the veteran actor had remained composed in the face of unfair treatment, how he had taken the time to stand up for the elderly man and for himself with nothing but quiet dignity. The story wasn't about Clint being Clint Eastwood, it was about the quiet power of respect. The viral nature of the story surprised Clint. People shared it on social media, talked about it in offices, and discussed it at dinner tables. It wasn't about the drama. It was about the way Clint had handled the situation, reminding people that they too had the power to influence the world around them. That afternoon, Clint received a call from the manager of the VIP bar, who had seen the story spreading across the media. "Mr. Eastwood," the manager began, his voice earnest, "I just wanted to personally thank you once again. You taught us a valuable lesson last night. Our staff is more aware now, and we're working hard to make sure something like that never happens again." Clint nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm glad to hear it. Just remember, respect is earned. It's not about the position, the title, or the money. It's about how you treat people, especially when no one is watching." The manager agreed, his voice full of gratitude. As Clint hung up the phone, he felt a sense of quiet fulfillment. He had never asked for this kind of recognition. His reward wasn't in the apology or the change in the bar's policies. It was in knowing that, even for just a moment, he had reminded people of the importance of simple decency. And that was enough. Please subscribe channel for Clint Eastwood. Respect, thanks.